So when will they be back? In what state? And why are you not telling us anything? Is it tomorrow? No, perhaps the weekend. Okay, next week. Definitely by the end of the week. I mean, these are the unkept promises that have been made by politicians and senior leaders of the military about the repatriation of the bodies of the 14 dead soldiers killed in combat in the DRC. And despite the promises as late as this weekend, many families say they're still in the dark about when it will actually happen. What's even more uncertain is if and how many soldiers were injured in the fighting and when they might come back. It would appear that there are challenges with basic issues like food and water for the remaining troops. This, of course, as the M23 rebels continue their offensive and taking over new towns. These are all questions we had hoped to pose to the Minister of Defense, Angie Motshekga, but as we were told, she's apparently busy in the mornings. She wasn't available. So I've invited two members of Parliament who spoke yesterday at that debate and who've got some views on this. We're joined by Mmusi Maimane, who's the leader of Build One South Africa, and Athol Trollip, who is a member of Parliament and, of course, who belongs to ActionSA. So welcome to you both and thank you for your time. Let's start with the repatriation question, and I'll ask you to have the first go at this, Mr. Maimane. Angie Motshekga yesterday said definitely this week, but we've been promised before.
Good morning and good morning to fellow South Africans. It is common cause that Minister Motshekga is certainly out of her depth as it pertains to this conflict. Secondly, it is clear the fact that South Africa's role in the DRC was not a peacekeeping mission as we keep getting told. Certainly that's inconsistent with the SADC's own resolution. It's a combat mission, and therefore there are profound hostilities in terms of making a pathway to make sure our troops are returned home safely. And so Minister Motshekga is really obfuscating this issue, and there's a whole government that seems to be beset on continuing our military presence there. And with poor information about how many exactly have been injured, as you've correctly pointed out, and more crucially, what is the pathway. The word on the street is that the nature of the mission will not be solved militarily. And therefore, we need to rethink this matter. And therefore, ultimately, she needs to be held accountable. As she made a commitment yesterday to say that by Thursday, those troops will be back. But in all fairness, none of us are holding our breath. And more tragically, it's the families of those who are waiting for their loved ones. And for me, this becomes a longer and a chronic cover-up, which from day one, we've been asking, what is our job in the DRC? And nobody in government seems to be able to give a proper answer.
Well, just last week, I mean, the chief of the army stood before Parliament and said tomorrow. That was his commitment. And here we are more than a week later and it hasn't happened. Athol Trollip, let me bring you in as well. Look, we can fly flags at half-mast or even wear black armbands, but the nation needs answers.
Bongani, you're quite right. And the tragic part about this whole story is that it's been more than 2 weeks now, and the bodies are decomposing of our fallen soldiers in the eastern DRC. Doesn't appear to be any kind of feasible plan to extract them and to repatriate them. But even worse than that, those soldiers have fallen, they've died, and their families are aware of that. But there are other families who are concerned about their soldiers that are wounded, and there is no casualty evacuation plan. Now, in any military operation, if you don't have a casualty evacuation plan, you are setting your troops up to fail and die. And what has happened in this instance, last year during the budget's adjustment debate, ActionSA opposed the 2 billion rand budget adjustment request because they said initially that they needed 4 billion rand. Now, if you require 4 billion rand for an operation and you pass a budget adjustment for 2 billion rand, it means from the outset they were under-resourced, under-equipped, and under-supported. And that has been the biggest tragedy here. Because when you go to war, or when you go into a war situation, you better have all your bases covered, and we haven't had that done. And in last week's meeting with the senior political leadership, the ministry, and the generals, they literally were like hairs in the crosshairs.
I mean, there was an extraordinary moment yesterday in the debate where the minister in outlining some of the challenges, almost in a kind of throwaway comment, spoke about challenges with food supplies. I mean, we're not even talking about the weaponry they might need. Food supplies. I've interviewed on this program a relative of one of the troops who said when she spoke to her nephew, the troops were rationing what little food remained with them. And you may, of course, also remember Paul Kagame, the Rwandan president, who claimed that in his conversations with President Ramaphosa, he was asked to assist with food and water. It is unbelievable that we are still there. Mmusi Maimane.
We would never, if you were a parent and you had your children go, you would never send them to the Eastern DRC. I don't understand why this government is committed. In the last two budgets, in 2022, they took 750 million rand away from the social grant welfare money in South Africa, deployed it to an operation in Mozambique, and then ultimately deployed the troops back to the DRC in the hope that there'd be repatriation of funds. And all of this money is on two accounts. The first is you're taking money from South Africans, so you end up with distressed South Africans without teachers, without healthcare, without police. And on the other end, the money that is meant to go into this particular combat is insufficient to fight this issue. Therefore, given the financial burden that you are placing not only on the state, but on the SADC region, it is an intractable conflict that will not end now. And it is tragic that we've sent our troops literally with poor equipment, no military support, no food, and hoping for them to stay in a conflict that is not going to be resolved now. My suggestions are simply this. We need to extract those troops. Secondly, we need to organize an urgent meeting between Tshisekedi and the M23 so that we can find a peaceful resolution. Thirdly, we need to make sure that Parliament has a proper inquiry so that we know what the extent of the injuries look like. And ultimately, SADC cannot be an honest broker in this matter. We need to solve the DRC's national question as part of SADC in its negotiations. Otherwise, this conflict is going to be continuous without solving the issue of the Bamuyelenga.
Athol, I mean, until Goma Airport, it looks to me, until Goma Airport is opened, it doesn't seem like we can extract those soldiers who are remaining, even if we wanted to. We seem to be completely at the mercy of the M23 rebels, who, whilst SADC and the East African community are having a big powwow, continue to advance.
Bongani, you got that 100% correct. First of all, our troops now are totally reliant on the M23. In a question that I put to the minister, a parliamentary question last year, I asked her, what are you going to do with this 2 billion rand funding? She said it was for operational logistics. Now it's clear that the logistics supply line is broken down. She said it was for ammunition, for fixed wing and rotary aircraft cover, for artillery, and also for strategic drones. Now, it's clear that none of those backup support systems were available. So we have our troops that are stuck there. They're being fed and given water once a day by M23. I am in touch with the parent of a lieutenant that is stuck in the Eastern DRC. And, until you can wait until the airports are open, but there is a conflict going on there between the DRC and the M23 rebels that are clearly being supported by Rwanda, and they don't want those airports opened anytime soon. So our troops are literally stuck there. And in the debate last night, the Minister of International Affairs, who was far more competent and confident than the Minister of Defense, was saying that they cannot extract their troops now because there's so many rebel movements around who are not party to any extraction agreements that our troops would be set up in ambushes. So we are completely out of control here, and there's a lot of obfuscation and denialism and defensivism by the Defense Force. And Angie Motshekga must be fired or resign. And the tragic part is she has a choice to resign or be fired. Our troops in the DRC had no choice. They were set up to fail and die.
I don't think either of those will happen as far as Angie Motshekga is concerned, but I appreciate both of you joining us this morning. Athol Trollip, ActionSA's Member of Parliament and the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane.
Current events, Developing stories.
Tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.